Hello everyone and welcome back to the STEM Village Virtual Symposium. This is session 3 and we're going to start this off with a few words from Sue Deuchars. Sue, take it away.
Thanks very much, and thanks very much for the welcome. So my name is Sue Deuchars. As I've said, I'm trustee champion for the diversity inclusion at the Physiological Society, and we're really delighted to be supporting this event. And the talks have been fantastic. Shrouk, I found your talk really inspirational, and I wish I'd had some of those inventions that you spoke about when I had my kids. So we feel really strongly about about diversity and inclusion in the society. And I have to say that perhaps our society was not best known for its inclusion in the past, and there was a lack of diversity. It was founded in 1876, but actually the first women were not allowed into the society until 1915, nearly 40 years later. And we've just had our first female president in Bridget Lum. So we felt that we needed to change this, and in 2014 we signed a commitment to improve diversity and inclusion. And we at first identified 2 trustee champions, and at the moment those champions are Rahila Khan and myself. We've got over 4,000 members working in physiology, and we feel really strongly that we want to promote opportunities that really are open for all physiologists, and to make it a welcoming community that is inclusive and diverse. We've got a formal structure, as every part of this needs to have, but we feel really strongly about engaging with members to see what they need. So in 2019, we further pushed this, and we wanted to make inclusion and diversity a really key objective. And so we have 3 main committees: the Publications Committee, the Conferences Committee, and the Education, Public Engagement and Policy Committees. And we embedded diversity champions across all of those committees. And we now have a diversity and inclusion task force, which further drives activities. So these are the members of the task force. We have Rahila Khan, who's the other champion and is chairing this, myself, Dame Bacano Kelly from the University of Oxford, who's really championing our early career researchers and is really keen to promote diversity and inclusion from an early age, from school age. We've got Kim Barrett, who's our editor-in-chief of our Journal of Physiology, and she's got a really active Twitter account, as has Keith Sue, who's on the Publications Committee and is our scientific editor of Physiology News. And we're actually led here very well and ably. All our activities are led by Chrissy Stokes, who is the head of professional engagement, development and engagement. And indeed, Keith Sue was a person who pushed the importance of increasing awareness by this diversity special issue that was produced last year, and I urge you, it's still available, so please try and get hold of a copy. We wanted to raise the profile of all groups, minority, underrepresented and protected groups, and we wanted to try and really push mentorship and experience. So this is where we're really hoping to go. We're collecting data, and our data collection is actually quite low, so we encourage all members of Physiological Society to help with this. But we support these external activities and groups, the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Diversity and Inclusion, and EDIS, the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion in Science and Health. And it's been really fascinating being part of the discussions of that group in particular. We want to support our members in all ways possible across, as I mentioned, all of our activities. This includes, we've got Support and Inclusion Fund to promote diversity and inclusivity in activities, but we also cover necessitous circumstances. So this has been really critical recently with issues with COVID, and actually supporting physiologists from our members across all communities. And this has been critical for certain countries just recently during COVID. We also, as today, we're supporting the STEM Village event, but we also supported the LBGT STEM Day. And then we've had various workshops that have happened at our scientific meetings. A very recent one was the one on mental health at our Future Physiology meeting, which was really well received. This is just a clip from it here. We've had sessions on unconscious bias, which was actually, we had people from the American Physiological Society there, and they really wanted to go back and do similar at their events. We also included Stonewall. We asked Stonewall to come and give a workshop at our Aberdeen, our main conference last year, on LGBTQ plus inclusion. So we feel really strongly that we need to keep pushing these types of events, and this is where we want your involvement and your help with this. So we're planning as part of the task force to have a stakeholder engagement forum, and we feel that this will be a safe space for people to share their experiences and ideas. So we're really keen to try and push this in the future, and this is why we feel really strongly about supporting events such as this, and I'm really looking forward to the further talks. We have carers funds to help people come to our meetings, and childcare facilities at meetings. So thank you for inviting me to talk. We're really glad to be supporting this event, and I'm looking forward to the talks later on.
Thank you. Really, thank you to the Physiological Society. I know that they've been on board with the STEM Village since before we were even a virtual conference, when we were planning to do it back in June in Edinburgh. The Physiological Society were on board back then, and your continued support has meant that this has been able to grow and flourish into what it is today. So thank you, Sue, and the Physiological Society.
It's a pleasure.
And that brings us on to our... Sue, before you disappear, could you do me a favour and pop some, whether it's an email address or a Twitter handle, into the chat box, so that if people have got questions, and there is one, but I'm afraid, Giles, we don't have time to take questions here, we can go offline with them and have them over Twitter or email. Thank you very much.
Will do. Okay, thanks very much.
And that leads us on to our first panel of the day. So we have now got 1 hour to spend on the drag panel, featuring Sassy Science, featuring Diva AttenBra, featuring Dancing Queer, featuring Yoriko Nakamura. So Sassy, Diva, Shrouk and Yoriko, if you could please turn on your cameras and show the world what you've got.
Hey.
Hello.
Hey.
Thank you all for being
You look
today.
so beautiful. I'm so sorry. I'm just like fangirling over people now. Is that okay?
That's fine. So this panel, with the theme is, what can we do now? And I've tried to structure it around that a little bit. I've got 3 questions for you, but before we start, let's get to know each other a little bit, huh? And I'm going to start alphabetically with Diva AttenBra. Hello.
Hey, is the video working? I have never, surprisingly, in all of COVID, used Zoom other than chatting with you. So
no, we can see your beautiful face. You're all good.
No idea what I'm doing. That's good. I'm technologically illiterate. So hi, everyone.
So hi, Diva.
I'm Diva, otherwise known as Matt. I am a PhD student at UNSW in Sydney, Australia. But as you can tell, I'm from the US. I studied various forms of wildlife biology and conservation science, mainly in the UK. And now I am doing my PhD on kangaroo behavior, which is very interesting stuff. And yeah, mainly looking at how kangaroos utilize their space, their habitat, in particularly their water resources, in arid New South Wales, so out in the outback. So that's me. Don't know what else I know.
Nothing more Oz than studying kangaroos in the outback, wearing a wig, 6-inch heels, and about 4 pounds of makeup.
Well, my field site's outside of Broken Hill, and that's like the Priscilla, Queen of the Desert town as well. So, yeah, very fitting for me to be working in that area on kangaroos.
So, continuing in alphabetical order, we're going to come down to Dancing Queer. I realise that alphabetical order is out the window with number 1, but I'm picking names out of a hat at random and trying to disguise it. So, we've had a talk from you already, Shrouk, but for anyone who was foolish enough to miss the last session, tell us about yourself.
Oh, that's so sweet. Hello, I'm Shrouk El-Attar, also known as Dancing Queer, engineer by day, belly dancing, drag king by night. I am an LGBT plus rights activist and refugee from Egypt, and I live in the UK and I've been living here since 2007. Nice to meet you.
So you're an engineer by day and belly dancer by night. Tell us a little bit about your engineering.
Cool. So I work in femtech now. I make technologies for cisgender men, for cisgender women or transgender men, or some non-binary people, anybody who can breastfeed, anybody who can give birth. But I've built a machine that can detect cancer. I've built a system that helps with eye surgery. And yeah, I've made robots for a living. So yeah, I love being an engineer. Being an engineer is my superpower.
That's so fierce.
Thank you.
Coming down the line, we're going to come Yoriko Yamamura. Yoriko, hello.
Hi.
Tell us about yourself.
Hi, I'm Yoriko, and I go by the handle Yoritam online also, but Yoriko is also fine. I'm a PhD candidate studying exploratory behaviors of mice, and I made a little slide to just like show what I'm
Do you want to share your
about.
screen and show off?
Yeah, can I do that?
You can.
Okay.
I think you've got permission.
All right.
はじめまして、Yoriko.
はじめまして。日本語喋る。Okay. Oh, you can also see my script.
Yeah, we can see it now.
Okay, here we go. Oh. Okay, I'm just gonna wing it because I can't see the text. Yeah, so I study exploratory behavior in mice. Specifically, what they do when they encounter an object they've never seen before. So basically, it's the mouse version of this GIF, this cat GIF. You can see the cats are kind of cautiously approaching the lobster or whatever until suddenly they decide to turn back. And I've just been really puzzled by this behavior and like been trying to understand it from a sort of computational point of view. And yeah, so that's what I do in science. And I also wear saris, the Indian clothes. And I have an Instagram account where I post pictures of myself, mostly wearing saris. I just love fashion from like all parts of the world, but especially I'm fascinated by Indian fashion. And so I just really love wearing saris and yeah, recently I got I won a sari styling contest hosted by Sonam Kapoor, who's this like really famous Bollywood actress. So that was super cool. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
These styles are incredible. You look so fantastic. Can't wait to hear more from you. Before that, we've got one more panelist to introduce. Sassy Science, hello.
Hi. Well, first of all, I'm Mario / Crisis / Sassy. Depends on where I'm at or what I'm doing. I'm currently still a PhD student, 3 weeks away from getting her PhD in condensed matter physics in the Institute of Nanoscience of Aragon. And I try to mix that when I have the time, because it's been a rough patch, with trying to do some SciComm using drag as means to do SciComm, and especially SciComm that's from and for LGBT people, and trying to keep it within the realm of let's highlight fantastic women LGBT people that have always been there in science.
Mm-hmm. So, welcome to our panelists. Thank you all for coming along today. We've only got an hour and 10 minutes that's already gone, so we're straight in with the questions. I sent them to you ahead of time, a little bit ahead of time. So I hope you've done your homework, because I certainly haven't. So, like I said earlier, the theme is what we can do now. And I'm going to come at that from 3 different angles. First of all, this is kind of a moment where social justice is coming to the fore around the world. And it's being driven a lot by the Black Lives Matter movement coming out of America, and that's taken up a worldwide angle. What can we all do now to make sure the momentum reaches and penetrates properly the STEM community? And I'm going to put that over to you first, because I know that this is a lot of what you do in your activism. And we'll have a quick discussion about that and move on to question 2.
I didn't hear. Did you say I'll take that to Shrouk? Is that what you said?
Yes, it is, yeah.
Oh, okay. So the question was, how do we keep the momentum in STEM, right?
Yes.
I think it's a really tricky question because it depends on if you work in academia or in the corporate world. And I think most people here are in academia. I'm in the corporate world. I happen to work for a fantastic company that is super kind of, you know, just open to listening. And I remember we had a meeting about it and the CEO said, you know, silence is not an option. And if you don't have that support from the top, it's just a lot more difficult to navigate. And I find that harder with kind of the corporate side of things because when I've had kind of, when something similar has happened before in other corporations, not where I'm working now, if we even acknowledge it, it'd be to say, you know, don't get political, don't post on social media, we don't want to be affiliated with this. So I think you need to find yourself somewhere supportive first. And if that's important for you and you're finding yourself in like not in that situation, then maybe that's not the right place for you. And I find it, and I mean, maybe correct me, people in academia, but I find it a lot easier in academia to be able to bring back these ethos. And I find people are a lot more supportive. But yeah, to keep the momentum going, keep talking about it, keep posting about it, keep celebrating it, keep reminding people about it.
Absolutely. So let's pick that up with somebody who is in academia. Mario, Sassy, you are just at the end of your PhD. You're probably the most senior academic on the panel. What's your take on this, on social justice in academia?
I'd say it's, well, at least as far as my environment is concerned, it's not as much an accepting mood towards it rather than a we don't talk about it. It's completely out of question. And if you visualize it, you do it for yourself. You're generally not, you're not generally going as, well, I'm coming from this institution and this institution. No, you generally are going as yourself. And then maybe if it goes well at some point, you'll have some sort of institution backup. But on a first basis, I'd say, maybe, I mean, academia is, at least I feel, less violent than corporate world when it comes to pretty much anything. But I don't think it's like as full of accepting people as we'd like to think, right? Or as it's needed.
Yeah.
Right. So I know that you have a physics background, so do I. It's certainly in the hard science community, as far as I've seen, individuality is as far as you can suppress it to put on your lab goggles and your lab coat, come into the lab and do the impartial work of science. We have two zoologists on the panel, in Yoriko and in Diva. I wonder if the sort of biomedical science, biology, zoology, have a different take than the hard sciences. Let's come to Yoriko first. That's okay. In terms of social justice, what's the sort of atmosphere in zoology?
Right. So where I am, I'm kind of, in a sort of like interdisciplinary field. So I'm kind of part like biology / zoology, ethology, and also part like neuroscience and like biophysics. Right. So it's kind of a mix. But in my institute and I think my field in general also, I think it's starting to change a bit, but generally it's considered, I think it's still a bit of a, like people think of it as maybe a sort of distraction from like what they actually need to focus on in order to get ahead in academia. And I think I myself have had that attitude for a long time. And I'm actually in the process right now of like kind of transitioning from just like being passively liberal while like in real life distancing myself from politics and activism to actually trying to be more actively like anti-racist, anti-transphobic, etc., being more involved. And basically I just had to go through a paradigm shift. Like in this community, like it's gonna take a long time until you know, like caring about social justice is gonna like affect my career in a positive way. Like at best, it's
Right.
You know, it's something you do in parallel. It doesn't really add to your career, and at worst, you know, you might antagonize some people. So I think that incentive structure really needs to change in the long term. But for now, I found it like really, it's been really helpful for me to have a community like STEM Village of just kind of like-minded scientists and like engineers who care about social issues and like and they're being vocal and active in their own communities. And like that's I think that kind of support and community is really important to like provide the extra motivation and incentive to keep
Right.
caring about social issues when that kind of incentive is not necessarily there in the academia like itself.
So before I come on to Diva for your take on this, I just want a couple of comments from the chat box that have been popping up. Clara Nellist says, this is why events like this are so fantastic for bringing us all together, which Kate Oliver then goes on to say, we do need unions and networks to weave the minorities together. For example, they work at an SME where there's 80 people, an LGBTQ plus network would be single figures of people. So having something across different companies, across the whole industry, where you can sort of unionize and get your issues seen really is that fantastic. And to that point, I want to congratulate Matthew on having such a diverse speaker. I think the first session will focus on social justice, and it was really fantastic to see using a platform like this to be so intersectional. In terms of social justice, what's your take? What can we do to bring it into STEM fields?
Talking to me now?
I am.
Sorry, I didn't hear that. So for me, at least, I think it's kind of, I mean, I can only base it off of my own experience, and it's kind of a two-part thing. I mean, I'm mostly a field ecologist, so it's a lot of the shift as well of working in, I've worked in a lot of areas that are considered more conservative. I've worked in countries where it's actually illegal to be gay. So that's always a difficulty for me as well. And so it's kind of that balance of, you know, voicing social justice and as well as being a young scientist, being able to do your research and being able to complete your degree. And a lot of places it's a safety issue as well. So that's a big one. But for me, I think when it comes to social justice, it's all about visibility and representation. And again, basing that off of my own queer experience, I didn't know any queer scientists through my undergrad and my master's, and got to my PhD and said, oh, don't see anyone else, so it's gonna be me. And I've had other queer people in my office and queer scientists message me or come to my desk and just be like, thank you for like being around, throwing up a rainbow flag, just to even know if it's a safe space. And I think that that can be replicated across sexuality, across gender, inclusivity, across race, across, you know, across the board. So I think if no one is doing it, you should be doing it, sort of thing.
So I think that...
So if you don't mind me stepping in, if that's all right. So I've been doing public speaking for about 6 years now, and this is the first time I give my engineering talk in drag, and this is a problem. It shouldn't have been the first time. This shouldn't be a thing you see once in a blue moon. And I think, you know, bringing it back. Okay, so corporations, academia, all these people, let's be honest, like money is what matters, okay? Mm-hmm. But research shows time and time again that diverse teams outperform those that aren't, like statistically, in money terms. So actually reminding these people that, you know, by promoting these, you know, intersectional issues, by promoting these diverse teams, you're not just doing the nice thing to do, it's the smart thing to do.
Mm-hmm. And that sort of feeds into something that Yoriko said earlier, that it's very hard to see being out issues as good for your career. But in fact, if you can demonstrate that it's good for your employer, good for your company, then it should absolutely be good for your career. Just drilling it home again and again, like you said at the start, Shrouk, keep talking about it, keep making these points, because we're saying it a lot. We're just waiting for somebody to listen.
Yeah.
Before I move on to question number 2, any last comments on social justice?
I was frozen for like 5 seconds, so maybe someone spoke about this. But when it comes to what Shrouk said about giving their engineering talk in drag, there's a thing that's very important there, which is there's this lingering idea in academia and especially in corporate world, I think in both, that normativity somehow equates rigor, and that for some reason people who are more normative are more rigorous when it comes to their science, which makes no sense, because actually being creative kind of equates a more fuller background in science than just going 1, 2, 3, 4 and repeat.
I'm just looking at all of this creativity that we're missing out in engineering because we don't take creative people in, and I'm just like, you know, what kind of beautiful world would we have lived in if we'd adopted these people in from the start? Like, what kind of creations are we missing out on because we're telling creative people that science, that engineering is not for them?
Something you mentioned in your talk earlier, Shrouk, that it took something like 150 years for somebody to change the breast pump that we use to for breastfeeding people, to change from the same thing we use as a cow. With a little bit more creativity, that could have been spread up a whole lot.
And, you know, that was headed by a woman. I'm just saying.
Of course it was.
Of course it was. Of course it was.
I am sort of loath to move on, but time is ticking on, and so I'm going to move on to question 2. So more than just social upheaval, we're seeing a change in the way that we work, the way that we travel, and the way that we share ideas at events and conferences like we're doing today. What does drag tell us about about what we can do now to engage with people in less conventional ways? Go in reverse order and come straight to Lady Diva AttenBra.
I just think drag, in a way, it brings out like so much like just fun and creativity in so many different people, and it's just there's an infinite like just spectrum of things you can do with it. And I mean, I think I go to Drag Race as an example because that's what a lot of people go to. But you see, some of the most successful queens are the ones that do what they love to do, and the ones that do like weird stuff. So,
Right.
Like you have Trixie Mattel like playing what is it, auto harp, like singing country music and drag. Like that is like weird, but it's only weird because it's not normal to society as a whole. But it's somebody that's just doing what they love to do and combining the different parts. And that's what I love about like drag and science, is it's bringing together 2 different parts of who I am.
Right.
And it's being able to express that in one sometimes beautiful, sometimes not so beautiful form. And that's the thing. I think that we have such a closed, as a society, a closed mind as to what we can do. Just
right.
go of all of the stuff we've been taught and just go off and do what we want to do.
A conference has to be in a hotel. A talk at a conference has to be a slideshow. These are all rules that no one made up.
Well, exactly. And I think like that's the big thing, is like as a young queer scientist who I'm a field ecologist, you cannot pay me enough money to put like a suit or like nice clothes on. And like that's the thing, is that
£1 million though, because I would totally do it for £1 million for the one night.
maybe I do need some new drag, like I need some new heels, so maybe. But I think that's the big thing, is like we're so stuck in these ideas of what what is what that we can't like just. And then I turn to different examples. Like I love where I work, like my office that I study in, I work, and half of the people walk around barefoot sometimes. I love that. Because you're just like, people are just like enjoying themselves, and then people want to do the work, and people do better because they're given that level of freedom.
They want to be there. So they're doing a good job, yeah. And like, so people, you know, if you've come to my talk, I said, take up space. What do you think taught me to take up space? You know, like drag, dancing, being on stage. That's how I take up space. That's how I've learned to take up space. That's how I've found my space on the table. And that's how I've learned not to quit when I was thinking about it. So yeah, I just love being a performer, love being a drag performer, and I love being an engineer.
Exactly. And the other thing as well is that everything, without fully being that one that bashes old straight white men.
I don't want to be the one, but I'm going to be the one.
Yeah. Sometimes it becomes this like culture that is just like so unwelcoming, and there's a lot of problems with academia. There's a lot of great things that I really, really love, and there's a lot of things I really, really hate. And I think drag is at least my outlet to help try and change the things that I really hate to make it just a bit more fun and more enjoyable for everyone.
I'm going to come next to Yuritam. So Diva's just talked about all the things that they love that drag gives them, all this individuality, all this difference. If you could take something from with your drag and your fashion and apply it to your work in academia or the workplace, what would you take away from drag and bring into your professional space?
That's a good question. I hadn't quite prepared for this question from that angle, so I have to think on my feet. But yeah, I think, I really agree with what Shrouk and really all three of you have been saying in the past few minutes. Like that, I think it really, well, just seeing people being scientists and engineers in drag really like shows me examples of that these things don't contradict each other. Like I think we're just in like much of academia, people are so used to thinking of science as something that doesn't mesh well with art or fashion or other things, and that these are kind of like I said, distractions from rigor. But it's I think maybe most of us think that if we think that it's because those are the examples we're seeing. And just seeing people like just being themselves, like trying all kinds of crazy things in and out of drag, but especially in drag because it's still so unusual. It really drives home that it's possible to do both of these things. And in fact, bringing in those diverse perspectives can actually enrich science and improve science and also technology. So yeah, I think it's for me personally, like it's been a huge inspiration that I can show more of myself even in an academic setting.
I can't agree more.
Yeah, absolutely. All this individuality just means that you bring more of yourself. If more of yourself means bringing your creativity, that's going to affect how you go about designing your analyses or go about coming up with creative design of experimental setup, of paper writing, of whatever else it might be. It feeds directly into what you do as your work.
Exactly, yeah.
Sassy.
And I'm just happier that way, I think. You know, I don't want to be in science. Like, I don't want to be a tenured professor, but miserable because, like, I'm just kind of suppressing a part of myself that, you know, I would otherwise have liked to show. So, and, you know, that doesn't hurt anyone. That, you know, that's a happy thing that I would be able to share with other people. So, so yeah, it's just better for everyone, I think.
Yeah.
So, Sassy, you didn't want to be the one, but you're going to be the one. Go on, sis.
I think drag, well, first of all, drag communicates everywhere, but in STEM too, from emotion and not from reason. And I think that's the right thing to communicate, because people are not going to be interested in something they're not curious about or passionate about, or they're not just going to be there. You cannot just show someone an equation and be like, be interested in this because it's important. Even if it's important, you need to emote in order for people to actually engage with you. And I think drag does that fantastically. It's a very versatile way, as Diva said, of doing something. You can do it through a look, you can do it through a lip sync, you can do it through your art, through your mug, through literally anything that you can think of. There are no rules, except one, which is we play with gender. We don't acknowledge that gender is a binary construct that is superset into very specific ways, and the way you've been born is making you follow these like straight on. So I think when it comes to, you know, straight white cis men in academia, I think it's a very nice, very glittery slap in the face to all these constructs that have been not just created, but supported by institutions for years, decades, I'd say even centuries.
I think particularly now in this socially distanced moment where a whole bunch of us that have upheld this male, stale and pale person on top of the ivory tower, they're crumbling now, and we're all shouting in this online forum. And if you can shout with a glitter beard and a sickening fan slap, then then you're bound to attract more attention, stale and pale people up in their ivory tower, and that can only be a good thing, I think.
Oh, true.
Shrouk, have you got anything to add?
I just want to echo like 2 words that Yoriko said, which is, well, more than 2 words. I can't do maths. But just what you said about just seeing people who do this, like seeing that people are scientists and drag performers, how powerful that visibility is. Yeah, really just, it's so powerful. And it's like, having that representation, you're like, yes, I can do it. Oh, other people are, yes, of course, it can be done. Yeah, it's beautiful. Thank you for saying that, Yoriko.
Thank you.
There's this thought that if you can't see it, you can't be it. But I'm not sure I've ever seen anybody with flowing green hair and a glittery green beard before. So I think that is true. And if you can't be it, if you can't see it, you probably should be it.
I don't know what clubs you're going to. I've seen plenty of green beards.
Oh, shade.
Spill, sis, spill.
Come to Australia and hang out in the swamp with me.
Outback with Diva AttenBra. I'm there.
Oh, just
You don't want us in science, everybody.
wait for the TV show. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be great.
So, piggybacking, if you can't see it, you can't be it, and social distancing online, whole bunch of opportunities question, that sort of brings us on to our third question of the panel. And that is, it seems like there's so many opportunities being lost, what with coronavirus shutting down bars and normal performing clubs. You said earlier, Shrouk, that do you remember when dancing was a thing in front of people? But there are so many new opportunities out there for researchers, science communicators, and performers. What can you do now that you couldn't do before? What can you do in this online socially distanced time. And I'm going to come, first of all, to Sassy.
I think, I've had my fair share of COVID-related communication, because I have a fantastic group of, I don't know how to translate this. I don't know the word in in English. I don't know if there's a word for it. Basically clowns. I know it comes from the Arabic word for clown, so I know at some point it means something related to it. Basically, they've kind of put me out of my shell while I was writing, and we've done several things that I'm really happy about. Because on top of being, I think drag at some point needs to correlate to your own culture. I know I'm not the one to say this, because my drag is a little bit on the Yankee side. It's not my fault that my mom is from the US, like my drag mom is from the US.
Beautiful.
But I loved the fact that we could, first of all, we did Ciencia Visión, which was like the Eurovision of science. We gathered up science communicators from Spain, and each one was chose actually a song from Eurovision from another year, but changing the lyrics to something scientific. We did a whole gala and everything. And I think that was not something we could do online before Corona. Like we literally did a musical using ABBA songs about LGBT scientists.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm sorry,
That's
I cannot like plug it because it's in Spanish. We're still working on the subtitles.
Plug it, girl, plug it.
Oh yeah, okay, I'll send it to you. I think it's something people are learning to actually work cohesively and cooperating, but being individually at their house, like at home, which is, I think, incredible, because it's something that as researchers is very useful for us, because we're used to pulling off all-nighters, being at home coding and literally doing nothing else for 2 days. And maybe when you're done with that, or with writing a paper, the fact that you can do something for 3 or 4 hours that is going to be self-completed, and you're going to be able to actually have a positive effect on psychom around you, I think that's very powerful.
Right. Absolutely. Being able to just show that you can be this different thing. I'm going to come next to Diva, because Diva, you're a bit of a baby queen. When did you start drag?
I'm a COVID queen.
Oh.
So yeah, so I've been doing makeup for probably like 2 years now. And drag was always, Diva's kind of been in my brain for like 2 years. And then I was like, never had the time, never had the money. And then COVID hit, and I was like, well, I've got all the time, but I still don't have the money. I'm gonna do it anyway. And yeah, she kind of just popped out. The one good
What?
Was childbirth difficult?
look. Mama didn't survive.
Need them.
Mom didn't survive. There can only be one diva on the planet. Mariah Carey, you haven't seen her lately. She's gone. Shout out at Mariah, don't kill me anyway.
So, what was it about COVIDina that sort of your shell and made you decide to throw Diva AttenBra out into the world?
I think the big thing for me is that I get quite a lot of social anxiety in person. Clearly not talking over the internet.
I'm clear right now.
Like I just think like to go out in drag for the first time, I would have been terrified. And COVID, like through all of the terrible things, has given me a chance to kind of slowly build up my persona and practice and figure out a look and do all these things that I feel like a lot of queens kind of have to do quick, or they feel like they have to do it faster. Obviously you don't, but so yeah, it was, and like I've only been outside of my house in drag once, to do a photo shoot in a national park, which was great. But the guy at the petrol station, he was a little bit freaked out when I paid for my petrol in full drag. But, he was a little surprised. But yeah, I kind of just thought, if there's any time to do it, now is the time.
That's
I look at photos
right.
from the gas station.
Yeah. So yeah, I did take a photo at the petrol station. It's a little lewd. It's a little trashy. It's a little, that's me.
What else is drag for if not being provocative?
Exactly. I think this point has been touched on quite a bit, is that science and I think academia and the corporate world can be so just boring and conservative.
It shouldn't be.
It's lost all the fun, and like you can say dirty things, and you can like, it's just words, and you can do silly, stupid things. They're just fun little actions, and they're not going to hurt anybody in the end. And if I want to show up to a conference looking like this and say a few explicit things, well, it's not going to kill anyone unless, some Gramps is there. But,
I technically have, and let me tell you, it's an even more hostile situation than general academia.
Oh, yeah. Like...
So
sorry.
It's even more hostile than general academia. So Mario, this is something we chatted about on Psy-Curious on the last episode that came out. You were at shameless plug. Plug here and there. You said that you went to a Women in STEM conference.
No, it was actually, well, first I went to ESA, which is the European Science Open Forum, which is where I launched the project, so to speak. But it was a really open environment, so it was cool. Like everyone was quite cool with it. And then last year I went to the biannual Spanish Royal Society of Physics meeting, and I had two talks. I had one as Mario talking about my research, and one as Sassy, because the group of women in physics invited me to give a talk. And the second day, I was fortunate enough to have the Women in Science group with me, because you could tell I was the elephant in the room. Oh, also one of the PIs that I knew asked me if he could touch a tit. I think we talked about it. I don't remember if it was with
We
Shrouk.
did talk about it on the podcast.
Oh, that was it. Yes, it was. Yeah, good times.
Oh my God.
I mean, the moment you portray femininity, well, at least I know I'm going to be exposed to that.
Right. God, that's awful. It's just at such a, la-di-da event.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Oh, wow. That's
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that. That must have been difficult to share.
Yes, I mean, it's funny because it's unprofessional for some reason to go like I went, but it's not unprofessional to ask somebody if you could touch a tit. Like there's this double measure. I don't know how to say it in English. But
No,
like
Standard.
double standard. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We're seeing that come through as well, with hopefully the Me Too movement coming into academia, because I think this isn't just a one-off occurrence, and I've certainly heard whispers through the grapevine of this happening all through academia in the past as well. But coming just back to the question at hand, which is about what we can do now. What we can't do now is approach people in drag at conferences and ask them, because we don't go to conferences in person anymore. But Shrouk, you've been publicly speaking for 6 years, and I don't know how long you... How has lockdown changed the way that you approach this? And what have you done differently since March of this year?
Oh, let me try to be positive about it. It's really hard to be positive. Okay, so lockdown happened, y'all, and I was like, best thing ever, because I was burnt out. I was doing, you know, my full-time job, and I was doing all the stuff in the evening and like the volunteering too, and it was just like I was burnt out. And then for like 3 weeks, I was like, best thing ever. I'm just gonna sit on my sofa and do
3 whole weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, 3 weeks. It lasted 3 weeks. It lasted 3 weeks. It lasted 3 weeks. And like I'm finding it so it just not like I find it more tiring to perform online than in real life, even though it should be less tiring. But I guess I'm not feeding off the audience feedback. And even when I'm doing a talk and I'm like, please can you unmute yourself so I know that you're having a little bit of fun, please.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I have been finding it difficult, but at the same time, you know, today wouldn't have happened. I wouldn't have been able to meet you. And there's been so many of these, you know, instances where like, oh, this would have never happened if we couldn't do it all completely online, and I wouldn't have networked with all these incredible, beautiful, intelligent people. So I'm trying to be like, I am okay with it as an interlude in the middle for doing all these things.
Stopgap.
Yeah, it's a nice stop in the middle, as long as we get back to normal at some point, please.
That's reasonable. And last of all, Yoritam, I want to bring this question to you. A lot of your drag, as I understand it, although do feel free to correct me, happens on Instagram and on Twitter. You're a bit of a social media queen. How has lockdown changed the way that you do your drag and also do your research?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So first of all, yeah, it's interesting. I'm a bit. I think I'm in a similar situation to Diva, because so I identify as non-binary, gender fluid, but so I've always thought of like dressing up in a like very sort of femme, like coded feminine way, as more of a drag for me than like dressing up in a more like masculine style. Even though, yeah, I sometimes go all out on the masculine side of drag as well. But I never really expressed that kind of unease. Like, I think I just sort of openly identified as cis female because it was more convenient for me to do so. And
right.
I wasn't like, you know, I didn't have such severe gender dysphoria that like I had to identify as something else. But I think with COVID and the lockdown, I think it's this kind of like experimentation with different gender presentations and just kind of reflecting on my gender identity got much easier because all my real life social connections were shut off for some time, and so I didn't have to worry about like how would other people react, like would they judge me, how would they respond. It's
giving the space to sort of give yourself a nursery.
Yeah, exactly. It was sort of a way to ease into this, like sort of more openly dressing in like gender non-conforming ways, or like kind of going over the top feminine as a kind of drag, as opposed to like dressing feminine because I am a woman. Yeah, like it's given me a chance to a kind of safe like intermediate space online, and also just like going to random places where I don't know anyone, like going shopping in a supermarket. Like, I mean, I have the privilege to stay at home otherwise, like, so I think that's a really fortunate thing that I had this freedom. I had the choice to like only go out in those occasions. But yeah, like that was for me personally, it was a blessing because it allowed me to ease into things that I would have found too difficult to do.
So do you think, I hope you don't mind me asking, but do you think your gender presentation is going to stay in this sort of non-binary space once, fingers crossed, normality returns?
Yeah, I feel like it's gotten much easier, partly because I do know some of the people that I also connect with online. And I think before I was worried about what they would think, but now that once I put it online, I realized that most of them really like it. And,
Right.
you know, I would have never thought, you know, I mean, I wouldn't have dared to do it before, but now that I know that they accept me like that, I feel more confident to do it more openly as well. So yeah, it's been kind of like training wheels for me. And also actually the same goes for political activism as well. As I said, like I used to be not so vocal about like social issues, but I think like during the summer, like during lockdown, I really got into the habit of talking more about social justice and just like engaging with other people. And hopefully that's a habit that I can continue when COVID is dealt with.
I think it's important. A lot of us have picked up a whole bunch of new things to lives during lockdown, whether it's gender presentation, activism, or just being a fabulous queen. And it's so important that we take what we need to on with us as we come out of lockdown. I think that's going to be a really interesting transition to watch as we go back to our normal everyday lives.
Can I ask a question about being non-binary in Japan?
Yeah.
So I lived in Japan for a little bit, and I found it a lot harder to talk about LGBT issues or just say that I'm queer, but it was a bit more accepted, I guess, because I was a gaijin, but obviously easier than Egypt. And I wondered, how are you finding it?
Yeah, Japan's a kind of interesting country to be queer, I guess, because I think we don't have so much of like traditional like religious taboos related to just any kind of non-binary or non-heterosexual way of being. So it's kind of accepted, but it's also marginalized at the same time. And, you know, it's not something that, you know, people don't really take you seriously, or, you know, they might make fun of you. You know, there are like many celebrities who are kind of openly gay or transgender on Japanese television. Many drag queens as well, but they're kind of sort of, they're very famous and, you know, accepted, but at the same time, they're kind of treated as a, you know, some other category of people like that, you know, they're not really considered normal. So I think it's kind of, it's relatively easy to just sort of, if you keep to yourself and don't really like, you know, go like in your face about it in public, people will just leave you alone. But if you try to be more open and, you know, like in more public or official settings, you try to maintain your yourself, then you get a lot of pushback. So yeah, that's kind of how it is in Japan, I think. And being non-binary, I think being kind of physically more feminine, it's a bit easier because people will just think, oh, you're just like a butch girl, like, you know, like you're a tomboy or something like that, which is more acceptable socially than like the other way around. So, but then people won't recognize you as something other than just female. So yeah, it's kind of hard to get recognized, I guess. That's maybe the issue I have, sorry, right now in Japan. Yeah. But yeah, it's not like, you know, I'm, super discriminated against or something, which is like really fortunate for me. So I have that privilege, but it's not that I'm completely accepted like this. Yeah.
So Kate and Kiri are having a discussion in the chat. Kate mentioned a while back about there's sort of a performative act at conferences where women have to put on enough makeup to look professional, but not so much that they look like Sassy or like Diva.
What do you mean? I woke up like this.
And Kiri says that they are an AFAB NB, and that there's such an interesting line to tread there in terms of being gender in just the right way and not going too far either which way. I'd love to stay and chat about that, but we've got 5 minutes left, and we have to address a couple of questions from the audience. So I am going to bring them up. So the first question that we have is from Kate. For the panel, do you prefer bringing STEM to LGBTQ plus spaces or LGBTQ plus to STEM spaces? Which is more needed? Any do's or don'ts? So who wants to tackle that first?
What a question! I'll let somebody else go.
Be controversial about it. I don't know how controversial you want me to be.
Go off, sis. Go off.
I think they're very different. I think bringing science to queer spaces is great because being surrounded by many, and I'm just speaking about gay men, sorry, there's a lot of not very smart gay men. Sometimes it's nice to, kind of just share some knowledge. No, I think it's more fun bringing my queerness to academia and to science because I think there's a shock value that I really, really love. And, I very much like freaking people out.
She likes being controversial.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely needed more. I think it's but I think it's there's a line because I think that generally society needs to realize that there are gay scientists. It's not as much bringing science to the gay community or the gay community to science. It's about bringing gay STEM to the world. Because I think it's a very strong stereotype of what it means to be a scientist and a strong stereotype of what it is to be gay. So I think that we need to break those. And that's definitely not from the question, but I threw it in there anyway.
So we obviously need to combine. Which is needed more, do we think? LGBT in STEM spaces or STEM in queer spaces?
Oh, definitely LGBT in STEM spaces. Whenever I've performed with a science theme for LGBT people, I've always felt welcomed. I've never felt bashed out or that like I didn't belong there. I've never felt like I didn't belong as a scientist with queer people, but I have felt like I don't belong with scientists as a queer person. So I think for me, it's hands down, LGBT in STEM is way more needed.
I think it's a hard one for me because, I hear what you're saying, Sassy, but also at the same time, I only know the figures for women because we're not collecting data on LGBT plus people, which is saying something here. But let's say when I started engineering in 2013, there was 8% of engineers are women in this country, 8%. And now it's 2020 and it's gone up to the magical number of 12%. Yeah, 4%.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's really hard for me to say one more than the other because we need to bring engineering to women too. We need to bring engineering to LGBT plus people too, so that they come in. So women are ruling themselves out from these subjects from a very young age, and LGBT plus people and people of color, because we're telling them it's not for them. So I think it needs to be both. You need to embrace the power of and again.
Yeah, the power of and. I'm going to move on to the last question because we've got 1 minute left, and that is from, let me just find it real quick, from Alexander. they've got their first conference next week. Any tips?
Go and
Ooh.
drag.
Go in drag.
Wear
Get yourself a
whatever.
wig. Get yourself some nails. If you're not wearing heels, you're not doing drag. No, seriously, any tips?
What kind of conference? Do we have any more details?
Nope, just the first conference next week, which I would dispute and say this is your first conference.
Oh yeah, are they just going? I guess maybe they mean they're giving a talk.
Probably.
So, if you're giving a talk, what tips would you give to Alexander?
Is anybody else?
It's a talk.
Yeah,
it's a talk.
definitely find something that makes you feel empowered in it, whatever it is.
Hmm.
Because personally speaking, as much as I love drag, this kind of drag, when I go to a conference, my most preferred kind of drag is male drag. And when I say male drag, I mean full on tweed jacket,
Oh, girl.
waistcoat, shirts, and well, I don't use like suits. That's like the one thing I won't do. But I like going in full male drag to conferences, because that's what makes me feel the safest, and not necessarily the most empowered, but like it makes the space more accommodating for me, which with my levels of anxiety is already a good thing to do. So I think is work for yourself. Wear whatever is gonna make you feel good with yourself. Do a presentation that's gonna speak for what you do. And yes, as someone already said here, rehearse as if it was your last number on earth.
But Sassy, also what you said earlier about making it like the emotion, like how am I, okay, yes, I'm really into, I love this quantum computing awesome badass thing that I worked on, but how do I make it make sense to people? How do I make them relate to it? How do I tell them that this is important for you too? So yeah, don't slap out the integral equations just yet.
No. Communicate.
So, unfortunately, that's all we've got time for. We are 3 minutes over time, so I'm going to have to call it to a close right there. I'd like to thank all of our panelists for coming along today, giving us their time, talent, and energy. Please give it up for Sassy Science, AttenBra, for Dancing Queer, and for Yori Tam. Thank you so much. If you four could post your socials into the chat box so
Sure
that
thing.
we can find you afterwards, that would be fantastic. And just a quick reminder to everybody who's watching, we have an audience participation survey, which I've just thrown into the chat box. If you can go to SurveyMonkey and fill it out and tell us what you think and really give us what for, so we can make next year that much better. And Alex, I know Alex, somebody said in the chat, look for the most awkward person in the room. That person is Alex, so good luck.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
everyone.
much. Ma salama. See you soon.
See ya.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
But we are going to be back very soon with the next session. Let me just find my schedule. The next session starts at 1:30 in 10 short minutes with a talk from Gail McConnell